Hi everyone, and welcome to Alaska Weather TV show. This is meteorologist Joel Curtis. Starting out today, we've got a couple of strong systems out in the both in the Bering Sea and out in the Gulf of Alaska. So let's get going with the warnings first. We've got high wind warnings for Yakutat Borough, Sitka Borough, and Skagway Borough, and then we have a flood watch for most of the northern panhandle, and those are going to be starting around midnight and then going into tomorrow. Also want to mention too that on Thursday, we're at times of high tide, we're expecting about 1 to 2 feet above normal high tides along the west coast, any place where the wind is onshore. So looking at today's satellite image, boy, this is really spectacular. I mean, we're looking at a really nice occluded front around the low in the Gulf, and then also a very, very strong front coming across. It's just now showing up really more wind, and AKwx is just picking up on the wind, and it's approaching the buoys west of St. Paul. So really, again, take a look at that occluded front. You don't see them better than that. That's really looking good out there in the Gulf of Alaska. And we also that front, a lot of precipitation out ahead of it, and some good southerly winds out ahead of it too. So for today's weather, we're showing, again, the low is way over on the Kamchatka Peninsula. 960 millibars, pretty strong. Then heavy rain out in front of the cold front, and then looking at that system in the Gulf, 962 millibars. Total occluded front wrapped around it. Rain's already occurring in southeast Alaska. A little bit of snow in the mountains or so, and quite a few showers around the front. And then for tonight, we see that low is weakening there over by Kamchatka, about 969 millibars or so, but the front continues to advance. Should be really felt at the Pribilofs tonight, and some heavy rain out in front of it. Mixed precipitation as you get farther north, like St. Lawrence Island and the Gulf of Anadyr. And then the low in the Gulf has weakened to 978 millibars, but still plenty of gale force winds around that system. Some snow again in the mountains, spreading with a little bit of snow into the central and eastern interior. And then, of course, the heavy rain in southeast Alaska with lots of showers behind the front. And then on Wednesday, we're looking at that low still weakening over there on the coast of Russia, 976 millibars. A secondary low has formed in Nunivak Island, 988 millibars. Again, precipitation making its way onto the west coast on Wednesday, and then a little bit of snow as you get further inland. And then the low has weakened right around, making landfall around Icy Bay or so, 999 millibars, with a secondary front that's formed up moving into southeast Alaska. And then finally on Thursday, that low weakens near the Gulf of Anadyr, 992 millibars in the Bering Sea, secondary front forming. And then lots of spokes around the wheel, so to speak. Lots of troughs that are moving around. And really, when you look at the situation like this, you want to say showers. So on and off snow showers inland, and rain showers out over the maritime regions. And also a secondary low forms up to 1,006 millibars on Thursday off of Cape Clear. And a cold front starts to form moving eastward toward the Panhandle again. So looking at our low temperatures Wednesday morning, we've got 20s and a few teens along the north slope. And then as you get further south, seeing 20s, Fairbanks looking like it's going to get down to about 30 or so. Once you get to the Alaska range, still some 20s, and also southwestern Alaska in the upper 20s. And then finally, as you get down to south central, you'll see those low temperatures in the 30s with lots of cloud cover, 42 for Valdez. And then finally, Kodiak Island still around 40, but then you can see a little bit of cooler air making its way to the Pribilos with 38. And then for the Panhandle, we've got low temperatures actually in the 50s with all that rain and cloud cover and warm advection. And then for high temperatures Wednesday afternoon, those temperatures stay right in the 50s over for the Panhandle, 49 for Yakutat. And then as we move further west for south central, temperatures in the 40s. You might see 51 along the coast there. Also, as we get further north, those high temperatures in Wednesday in the mid-30s or so, and dropping down into the 20s as we get farther north. And then look at all that warm air moving up to the Alaska Peninsula with temperatures right around 50 or so. And then for Thursday morning, our lows again in the 20s along the north slope. But then as you get further south, first of all on the west coast, you'll see those temperatures now have lows have warmed up into the 30s. But in the interior, they're still in the 20s or so. Down in south central, the mid 30s, so not looking below freezing there. And temperatures in the 40s for the Panhandle. And then as you go out the Alaska Peninsula, temperatures in the 40s. And then high temperatures Thursday afternoon, looking for along the north slope, we've got temperatures in the 20s. As we get a little bit further south in the Brooks Range, temperatures are in the 30s, right around freezing or so. But then look at that Nome, high temperature of 41 in the afternoon, a lot of mid-30s in the central interior, and then mid to upper 30s as you get mid to upper 40s, for south central. And then all the way up to 50 and even 53 degrees at Ketchikan for the Panhandle, and then high 40s as we go out the Alaska Peninsula, and in the mid 40s out for the Bering Sea. So for our 6 to 10 day outlook for October 24th through the 28th, we're seeing a lot of normal temperatures across most of the state, but below normal as you get over into the southeastern mainland, and then also below normal for the southeastern Panhandle. A little bit above normal chance for the southwestern coast. And then for our precipitation outlook, pretty good chance, approaching 60% or so for Bethel and the Dillingham area for above normal precipitation. And really, as we start to get further north and east, about, almost an even chance that we're going to be above normal precipitation. Also for the southern Panhandle, looking like above normal precipitation as well, but a lot of normal as you get to the north slope and the eastern Brooks Range. And then for 8 to 14 days, we've got October 26th to November 1st, we've got looking at below normal temperatures, which is a bit of a switch, as for much of the central interior, also south central Alaska, and then on over to Yakutat or so, and the northern Panhandle, normal temperatures for southwestern Alaska. And then looking at the precipitation for that same time period, a slight chance of above normal precipitation for the southern part of the mainland portion of the state, as well as the Panhandle, and a little bit better chance for the southwestern coast. So with those two strong systems, stay safe out there, and thanks for tuning in.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hi everyone, and now for your aviation forecast. Starting out with our flying weather Wednesday morning, extensive IFR out ahead of that front across the Pribilos and St. Lawrence Island. Also southwestern Alaska with lots of IFR conditions all through the central interior, and then on up to the north slope. And then we have another area of IFR associated with that storm in the northeastern Gulf Coast. Lots of marginal VFR flying elsewhere across the state with a few areas of VFR. For Wednesday afternoon, extensive IFR as that front approaches from all the way from St. Lawrence Island down to Cold Bay and across southwestern Alaska. Also a little bit in the eastern part of Kotzebue Sound all along the North Slope, as well as the central interior and then on into the northeastern Gulf. Then for Thursday morning, we have extensive IFR along the North Slope, down into Kotzebue Sound, also for Norton Sound, across much of southwestern Alaska, as well as the central interior, Cook Inlet, Prince William Sound, Kodiak Island, and a little bit eastward. Marginal VFR flying elsewhere. And then for Thursday afternoon, most of the areas are marginal VFR. Systems are weakening and lifting out. We do have some for southwestern Alaska as well as the northeastern interior, and then out across the Gulf of Alaska. So for our pass conditions on Wednesday, we have Anatovik Pass, IFR with some marginal VFR to the north, Adigan Pass, IFR, Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, both IFR, Rainy Pass, IFR, Windy Pass, IFR becoming a marginal VFR, Isabel Pass, IFR, Mentasta Pass, IFR, Tanita Pass, marginal VFR, Portage Pass, marginal VFR, Chilkoot and White Pass, marginal VFR with moderate isolated turbulence. And then we have, for our freezing levels on Wednesday morning, at the surface, north of the Bering Strait, comes down into the southwestern interior and then on up for most of the central interior. And then we start seeing 2,000 feet ramping up across the Alaska Range and on across. And then also we have lots of warm air in that 4,000 feet out in the Aleutians, as well as 4,000 feet in the Gulf of Alaska, ramping up to 6,000 and 8,000 feet as you get across southeastern Alaska. So for our icing on Wednesday, we have considerable moderate icing for an area above 6,000 feet across from Nunivak Island down through Dutch Harbor and the Cold Bay area. And then we also have another considerable moderate area above 4,000 feet for most of southeast Alaska, including the Yakutat area and down through Dixon Entrance. Otherwise, across the state, most of northern Alaska, isolated moderate between 2,000 and 10,000 feet, and that stretches also down into the Gulf of Alaska. For a jet stream on Wednesday, we've got two strong branches of the jet, generally westerlies through Dixon Entrance up to 140 knots. One branch of the jet, northerlies over Utiagavik, about 70 knots. Southerlies over just west of the Bering Strait, 95 knots. And then south of the Aleutians, ramping all the way up to 185 knot westerlies. And then for our 9,000-foot winds, again, through the Bering Strait, about 55 knots of the southerlies, 75 knots south of the Aleutians for westerlies, and then a couple of branches, 65 and 50 knots as you get into southeast Alaska. Then for our 3,000-foot winds on Wednesday, we do have quite a low-level jet out ahead of the front, about 50 knots as you get up toward Cape Moranzoff and over to the Bering Strait. And then as we cross the Alaska Peninsula, 50 up to 65 knots, anywhere from south to southwest. And then also we have a little branch of westerlies going into southeastern Alaska. So for our turbulence on Wednesday, a couple of spots with isolated severe in the Cold Bay region, Unimak Island, and up to the Alaska Peninsula, as well as southeastern Alaska, surfaced at 6,000 feet with low-level wind shear. Otherwise, areas of ramping down to considerable moderate to isolated moderate turbulence. So fly safe out there.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and today I'm privileged to introduce Dr. Uccellini, the Director of the United States National Weather Service. Welcome back to Alaska, sir.
Thank you, Dave. Glad to be here.
Thanks. Prior to being the leader of the National Weather Service, your work included an extensive look at snowstorms across the northeastern United States. These are the types of storms that can bring some of the country's largest cities to its knees. Tell me a little bit about your fascination with snow.
Well, as far back as I can remember, I've always been interested in weather, growing up as a kid on Long Island, New York, and was particularly fascinated by snowstorms, why they occurred. The distribution of snow was very varied across the entire region. The rain-snow line, all those things fascinated me right from the get-go. And I was interested in knowing how they worked, how the forecast worked, or more often than not, didn't work one way or the other. And that drove me, that interest continued to build and drove me through high school right into college, wanting to be a meteorologist.
Okay, that's a fascinating story, and I think every meteorologist has a weather story like that in some way.
Right.
Due to Alaska's size and proximity to the North Pole, sometimes it's difficult to detect and analyze the weather patterns over Alaska. What's the National Weather Service doing to improve that weather detection?
Well, observations in this type of environment is a big challenge, whether it's from space or from what we call in situ observations from the ground or within the systems. Clearly, satellites have been playing an increasing role in providing the big picture, not only from a visual sense and what you see is occurring, but also from providing the data for numerical models that then are used to actually predict the weather. Alaska is actually pretty well positioned with respect to polar orbiting satellites, since you get a faster return of those satellites over your particular area. And in fact, the polar satellite system is the backbone for the observations that we use in our models, especially our global models, and they're particularly important for observing weather features that affect Alaska.
Alaskans live and die by the weather every day, and one of the strategic goals of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the National Weather Service is to develop a more weather-ready nation. What does it mean for Alaskans to be weather-ready?
Well, the strategic outcome is based on people being ready, responsive, and therefore resilient to the increasing threats to extreme weather events. Those threats are related to not only the nature of the events, but the fact that we're becoming more vulnerable to them as we have more people, more infrastructure that could be affected by these events. So we have to ensure that the observations we make for situational awareness, the forecasts we make for people to take the proper responses, are connected to people's actions, the response to these events, so that they will be more resilient to what's facing them. You know, there are examples with respect to hurricanes. More people living along the coastline takes longer to evacuate. We have to make better forecasts with longer lead times, but we also have to communicate the threat so people will actually take action to avoid those storms. Up here you have, as in other parts of the United States, an increasing threat related to fire. As there are more people living in fire-prone areas, we have to ensure that our forecasts are good, that we don't have false alarms that make people not react to the forecast when in fact they should. But we also have to be able to communicate the threat and make sure that we're working with the partners in the emergency management community so that communities and right down to individuals will actually take the proper responses in the face of these events. So that's the strategic goal. There are a lot of challenges for us in terms of improving forecasts, but also improving our communication skills and linking with the emergency management communities that are actually out there trying to protect lives and mitigate property loss.
So a huge partnership effort going forward.
That's one of the important keys for the success of meeting the strategic goal.
Okay. One of the things you're talking about was understanding the weather information we're getting back from the computers, weather modeling, and you did a lot of work with that in some of your prior positions with the Environmental Prediction Center there, the National Center for Environmental Prediction. What can you tell us about recent improvements in that weather modeling? And you were using the polar orbiters as kind of a source of information that started that process.
Well, you know, first of all, we have to recognize that everything you see, you read and hear about weather, climate, or ocean forecasts are all driven by numerical models. Now, it really has been the revolution in our forecast process in the last part of the 20th century. The success of that numerical enterprise is based on three factors: big computers, global data, not just local data, but you have to have a global data set, and then the models themselves, the science that's behind the models and in running the models in an operational mode. So we're working to improve all three of those components. We upgraded our computers last year. We're going through another upgrade even as I speak. We'll be upgrading from 200 trillion calculations per second to 700 trillion calculations per second by January of 2015. This increase in the computer will allow us to run what we call Earth system models. It's not just the atmosphere, it's the atmosphere, ocean, ice, which is obviously very important up here, and land models that are all coupled together at higher resolution. So you need the big computers, you need the science that allows us to run these models and run them in a parallel mode, and that they're coupled so that the ocean effects could affect the atmosphere and vice versa, as an example. And then the global observations are absolutely critical, and over the last 20, 30 years they've become more dependent upon the satellite systems, and especially the polar orbiting satellites, which help drive the observations needed for those models, whether they be atmospheric observations, land, ice observations. We're deriving more and more of that from satellites now that feed into these models and produce forecasts with extended lead times. Now out, for extreme events especially, we're seeing much improved forecast out in the 4, 5, 6, 7, and even 8-day range, which gets us back to Weather Ready Nation, because if you're going to get ready for a storm event, you want those consistent forecasts approaching that event from day 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, so you can take the actions several days in advance that can help mitigate the property loss and protect your livelihood.
Okay, all part of the mission of protecting life and property. Dr. Uccellini, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and speaking to Alaskans and sharing how the National Weather Service is working for Alaska and the nation. Wish you safe travels around the 49th. Enjoy your time here, sir. And for Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hi everyone, and now for your marine forecast. Starting out with the sea ice edge, not much change over the last few days, but with some southerly winds coming up, we can expect some erosion of the ice in the southern portions and a little bit of buildup to the north. Looking at Wednesday's marine forecast, solid 40 knots off of southeast Alaska and seas up to 40 feet. With that storm force low moving into about Icy Bay or so. On the inside waters, 30 to 40 knots and seas up to as much as high as 16 feet on the inside. And then for Thursday, wind 20 to 25 knots on the outside, seas up to 12 feet. And then on the inside waters, winds ranging from 10 up to 25 knots, seas up to 5 feet. For south central waters, starting out with 30 knots on the outside and 20 knots in Prince William Sound, 15 to 25 knots in Cook Inlet, seas up to 24 feet on the outside due to that storm, and then on the inside up to 6 feet down by Kennedy Entrance. And then for Thursday, we've got winds 25 to 30 knots on the outside, seas up to 12 feet, 20 knots in Prince William Sound, and up to 25 knots in Lower Cook Inlet, seas up to 7 feet. For the peninsula and Kodiak Island, we're looking at westerly starting to pick up, ranging from 25 all the way up to 45 knots, seas up to 17 feet on the Pacific side. For the Bering Sea, 30 to 40 knots and seas up to 10 feet. And then for Thursday, we've got westerlies again, 20 up to 30 knots, seas up to 15 feet, and then on the Bering Sea side, 25 to 30 knots, and seas 12 feet. For the Aleutian chain, we've got behind that strong front, we've got winds ranging from 40 down to 25 knots, seas up to 17 feet and 20 feet out in the other western Aleutians on the Bering side, and then winds 30 to 45 knots and seas up to 18 feet on the Pacific side. And then for the Aleutian chain on Thursday, we've got westerlies to south, mainly southwesterlies, around 30 knots, seas up to 18 feet on the Bering Sea side and up to 14 feet on the Pacific side. And then for the west coast, we've got winds with variable directions. In front of the front, there's an easterly component of the wind, 20 to 40 knots. And then behind the front, 45 knots, seas 18 feet by St. Matthew. And then looking at Thursday, wind starts to become onshore just about everywhere, 15 to 25 knots. High tides will be running 1 to 2 feet worth of the onshore winds. And then for the Arctic coast, we're looking at generally easterlies, 15 to 25 knots, seas up to 6 feet in the open water, and then down by the Bering Strait, southeasterlies 35 knots, seas 18 feet. And then looking at Thursday's marine forecast, again, easterlies, 20 ranging up to 30 knots, seas up to 10 feet in the Chukchi Sea, and then southerlies 15 knots, seas 10 feet in the Bering Strait. So looking at Wednesday's weather, again, that low going onshore near Icy Strait around 9 millibars, front moving up to the coast in southwestern Alaska and all along the west coast. And then on Thursday, we've got a bunch of troughs out there with a cold front forming up in the Gulf and 992 millibar dying out near the Gulf of Anadyr. And so looking again, we've got a couple of warnings. High wind warning late tonight, well into tomorrow, gusts over 60 miles per hour for the northeast Gulf coastline. Also, we have a flood warning for the Taya River and a flood watch for the much of northern southeast. And also, I just wanted to mention, I got a look at buoy 46085 just before the broadcast here. They were gusting to 52 knots and seas 30 feet, but with the buoy going up and down in that 30-foot sea, you could expect that the wind, sustained wind, is at least 52 knots. So that's really shaping up out there in the Gulf as being a real nasty thing. That low probably has hurricane force winds on the inner core, and then we have storm force all around the compass around the low. So that's it for our marine forecast. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.